Hey everybody, my name is Ethan from Matterform, and I am super stoked to finally get to release the Companion Controller plugin that I've been working on for a while. This plugin is made to bind TouchDesigner and Bitfocus Companion, and to make the integration for using them together just way easier. So let's dive in and take a look at it. So what we can see here is the Companion interface. This is a great software. If you don't know a bunch about it, I'd recommend checking out some YouTube videos on it. But I can talk a little bit about it briefly. So we have a bunch of different options for connections. These are great ways to just control using the SDKs and the APIs that are pre-built in to Companion. So we can control things like the Blackmagic ATEM or projectors or routers or lighting control like DMX and OSC. So we have all of these abilities here, but we are able to put them into buttons. And this button looks a little bit like the Stream Deck. And if you're familiar with this, it's a great tool. What we can see here is that as I press these buttons, they press buttons on that screen. So what that means is that we can create a emulator, and we can call that whatever we want, Companion. We could also create some variables like random things, like this is my variable. Now what we do is we export after we've created a full config, and we export using the JSON standard. Or if we use an older version of Companion, we just need to use the uncompressed file format export. So they're basically the same thing. They both work the same way. So we're going to export as JSON standard, and that's going to go into our downloads folder. So now let's go over and let's drag in this Tox. So first things first, if you already have Companion running, it's going to show up with this. And this is the emulator chooser window. We also have the ability to launch Companion from here. So if Companion's not running, which is pretty likely, then it is going to look like this when you boot it up. You can click on Launch Companion, and that's automatically going to send a batch script to run it. This also works on Mac, so it runs with an Apple script. And then we are going to match the IP address, so that's the same by default, and the 8000 is also the same by default. So we're all good here, so we can just hide this guy for now. We also have the ability to relaunch if it gets disconnected. So if Companion was to crash, then our plugin is able to actually double check and ping it like every 5 seconds to see whether or not it's alive, and then it'll relaunch Companion to just persistently make sure it's always on. This is really handy for permanent installations, just to even like double check and ensure that, hey, Companion's running, all of our triggers are happening, and we're good to go. So now let's dive into how to actually use this. So what we're going to do is we're going to activate the window, and we can actually click inside of the emulator chooser. And down here, it's now changed our web address to the link that's unique to that emulator. If we want to choose a different one, click on load, you can reload. And if you just click reload, it'll just reload on this page. Once this is set, it's going to stay, so you can just reopen the same emulator once it's good. What we do now is we have a few things here to look at. So we have the log, and the log just tells us how things are doing. This was really inspired by .simulate's Stream Diffusion log, really well implemented there. So what we also have is the help button, and this is just a nice little GUI to just explain how this program works. It also explains all of the variables and gives us a little bit like about me, and also shows Patreon and all the different links for our studio. Then we have the ability to load the actual config file. So when I click here, it says ready to generate controller. If you find that, let me find a broken one, it says, there we go, Companion config file must be JSON. So that is saying, hey, it's compressed, we're not able to open this file, so it's going to double check. It's also going to gray out generate controller. So if you're running into that problem, it's because you're not exporting the right type of file. So let's load the newest file here. We can tell this is the newest by the time. And then we are going to click generate controller. So what this does is this creates custom variables and buttons from that JSON. And what's really nice is if I scroll down to the program page, I'm able to click and control Companion directly. This also lines up with my Stream Deck, so we're both able to control this kind of like a multiplayer, and I am also not interrupting anything or being interrupted by anything. The reason we don't have feedback is because we don't really want to have feedback on these parameters the same way. Maybe it'd be useful, but if we're using things like expressions, then it's going to be annoying because it's going to break our expressions. So we'll get to that in a little bit too. For the custom variables, I can go over to the controller and click custom variables. This is going to then show me all of my custom variables here. And I can scroll back up and I can just add test. So I can see it just showed up. Now we can also send custom variables that have pretty complex special characters, but you will notice that not all of them make it through, and that's because we have a couple of illegal characters, and that's just the hashtag and the ampersand. So now those all pass through, so we're good. The only other thing I've found is that the sample rate for this is around 1 second, so don't expect to be able to send like time code perfectly. It's probably going to be the second for time code, but not the frames. That'll definitely not work. For your buttons, also similarly, there is a small refresh rate. However, this one is extremely fast, and I haven't actually cracked how fast it is. So maybe we'll find out pretty soon. But I've sent really quick information to it, and it's been fine. We'll show that off in a little bit. So let's go back to our emulator. And then let's show off some of the abilities for different options. We're going to skip this one because this is really, actually, let's address it now. This will be kind of fun. So we can go in and we can grab, let's say, this little expression reference, and we're going to control the program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag these on here. Okay, great. And as you can see, it's updating there. It's super duper quick. It's also updating on my Stream Deck. And most importantly, it's updating on my little switcher. So that is great because that means that we are getting really fast control. So in this case, if you were to recreate a config and overwrite this one, you would lose all of these references normally in TouchDesigner. However, we have the ability to repair them, and this just temporarily saves them to a cache and then re-puts them in afterwards. So let's show an example of that. So if I clear the controller, you can see that little line for the reference went away and it stopped moving. Let's generate it again, and there we go, it's working again. So we can even go in and separate them into separate pages, and it still works. And that's because these are referencing based on the button number, and that button number is the page, and then the row, and then the column in 2 digits each. And that is like a universal number that Companion uses to be able to figure out what button is what. That then sends over an HTTP request with that button ID and says down or up based on what you tell it to. So these expressions can be pretty complicated and do a lot of different cool things. So you can actually have like a position trigger based on where someone's standing using a tracker, and it can automatically take which camera view is supposed to be in frame. So you can automatically have a whole switcher set up based on where you're standing and walking around a room. So there's a good little example of, something you could use this for. And the variables also can be passed along. So you can say like, hey, I'm going to now name this person's name, and then that gets sent over to like another software, and then that can be dynamically changed. So there can be a central control for everything. Then we have some other little settings that are cool. So we have the custom variables can also be turned off in case you don't want that. We can also even exclude all of the pages and have just the custom variables by saying exclude, let's see, 1 through 99, let's say, and now we only have the ability to change the custom variables. We can also select a range and say like 1 through 3, and then let's say 12. So I'm only going to get page 1, 2, 3, and program in that scenario. Sometimes it's a little confusing to know which channel and which page you're working with. So you can turn on the page ID numbers, and that's going to throw a number in front of these so you know exactly which one's which. You can also do that for the single page version, and that just puts it inside of the header at the top. The other little helpful bits is you can also show to exclude and select. You can turn that off. You can print concise and verbose. That's pretty handy. And then the most important one, in my opinion, is the relaunch if disconnected. And then the second most important is the repair reference for expressions. Lots of cool tools in here. There's also a couple little secrets that are hidden in here too, that if you go into the extra options, you can change where Companion is installed in case you have it in a different place. And that can just be routed directly in somewhere else. Then you can also clear the parameter map cache, and then you can turn on the custom parameter built-ins if you need to change anything for this. In the case that you were scripting, the way that we would reference things like this is we would do something like have a text, and we would do operator, and let's do .par button 01, and let's just find one, 010001. And then let's do equals true. So if I go in here and I right click on this run script, it's going to now turn that button on. So that's a nice little quick way to be able to also script to these. And there's false. Oops. There's false, and now it's off. So you can do that. You can also do that to your custom variables, and that is going to take from the custom variable number. And these ones are named a little bit differently, so they can be a tiny bit more tricky. So heads up on that. I would recommend naming your custom variables as like custom var1, custom var2. If you can track them, it's a lot easier that way, just because these technically are a bit more dynamic in their names. So this is pretty much all of the main functionality that's here. I'm super excited to finally get this into the public's hands. And you can join me on Patreon. That's where you can download this tool. And please tag us if you get to use it. We're really excited to get to see all the different creative things that people can do with this. So thanks so much for watching, and super stoked to see you guys in the future. Bye.